turn the boat on. So the boat is on and you can see the gauge reads 0. Hey, welcome back to GT Canada. Today we're on my old budget surfing boat and I got a little problem that I want to check out, and I'm going to show you how to check it out yourself. So my fuel gauge has stopped working. It worked last season, and then this spring it just wasn't working anymore. So something has changed. Either it has broken or something just stopped working. I have some suspicions of what it is, but I'm going to show you how to go through and check the system. It's very, very simple, basic system, so it's easy to troubleshoot. So the first thing we're going to do is stick the key in and turn the ignition on and see if it just magically has fixed itself. There's my fuel gauge right there. It still reads empty. Now I know I'm not empty. I need to dig a little bit deeper into this system. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to shut the power off. And I want to check the sending unit first. Now my gas gauge is the one right on the top here. So I'm just looking around here to the back. Now, I don't think I need this out any more than it is. The top one is simply a light bulb, as you can see there. So I've just pulled that out. So that is not going to make this work or not work. So in the back you can see there's an S, there's a plus, and there's a minus. So the S will be the sensor plus. So I should be able to go from the sensor plus to the negative terminal and read that same 90 or whatever it was ohms. So on this boat, my fuel tank is right there, and I've got this access hatch to get to it. Not this one, it's this one. Your boat might be different. It might be in the back, it might be in the front, it might be in the middle, whatever. It doesn't matter. My fuel gauge is this right here. So this is the type of fuel sending unit that I have. Most boats will have a similar sending unit. The other thing I can do, if I open this up, I can sometimes see in here how much fuel I have, because that's the edge of the tank. So I'm going to look and see if I can tell how much fuel I actually have, so I know kind of what I expect once I get this working. I just had a look down in that hole, and based on what I can see, I've got still about 1/4 to 1/3 of a tank. So I do expect that once I get this working, that I should be able to see fuel on the meter. So the first thing I want to do is check if this sending unit's actually working. Use a meter like this. If you don't have a meter like this, I'll put a link in the description where you can get one. You just need one that'll measure resistance in ohms. And we're going to turn this to the 200 ohm setting, and then we're going to put it on the negative terminal and the positive terminal from the sending unit, and I get about 85 ohms. Something important to know is the meter itself, or the gauge itself, also has an internal resistance of around 85 ohms. This is probably not connected, that there's an open connection in here somewhere. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to test that the wiring is good and the meter is good from down here at your sending unit connection. The first thing you want to do is turn the boat on. So the boat is on and you can see the gauge reads 0. What you can do is you can come down to this sending unit, and all you want to do is pull this connection off and touch it to that one right there, and then what you'll see is it's empty, now it's full. So what that tells me right off the bat is the gauge is good, the gauge has power, and the wiring from the sending unit to the gauge is okay. I know that my wiring is okay because I was reading that 89 ohms on the sensor side of the wire. That means that the wire is connected to the gauge and that's working okay. So the other things you want to check is, do I have power to the gauge? Which you can just use this same meter, and you're just going to put it to DC 20 volts, and you should have battery voltage. Ideally you would have around 11 to 12 volts on this gauge when you go between the battery connection of the gauge to ground. If you don't, then you do need to figure out if you've got a blown fuse, broken wire, or something like that. The gauge is probably okay, it just has no power. If you have power, and the wire is good, then the gauge is no good and you'll need to replace it. And I do have a link to a new gauge in the description. It's reasonably inexpensive. It's a nice digital one and it'll work perfectly for you in that application. For me though, I know that my gauge is good because I just tested it and saw it sweep from empty to full when I touched those wires together. So I know my wiring's good, I know my gauge is good. What I need to do is look at my sensor. This sensor is actually a arm type sensor. I'm going to put it up on the screen what it looks like. And I was able to open it up and stretch the spring out. When I put my gauge on here, it was reading nothing. Like it was as if I didn't connect anything at all to it. But by opening it up, reconnecting it and putting it all back together, this gauge goes from 33 ohms to 290 ohms. 290 would be empty, 33 would be full. So I've got about a half a tank right now. So I was successfully able to fix this just by opening it up, stretching out the spring, and then reattaching everything together. So now when I connect this back up, like this, and I also, just for fun, you can see there's some score marks on here. Boats corrode, things corrode. So by putting those score marks, it helps me get a good connection when I clip this back on. So now if we look at that gauge, it says I've got about a half of a tank because the gauge has been fixed. So that's really all it takes to troubleshoot a fuel system on your boat. It's not that difficult. Again, there's only three main components. Your fuel sending unit, which will be in the gas tank, the wiring from the fuel sending unit to the gauge, and the gauge. Everything else you can isolate and troubleshoot very easily. If you do not have a meter on board and you're out on the lake or whatever and you just want to know if it works, the easiest test you can do is to simply pull off that wire at the sending unit, touch them together and see if the gauge changes. If the gauge changes, sending unit's the problem. If the gauge doesn't change, it's likely a fuse or a power issue initially. And if you trace the power out and you do have power there, then just replace the gauge. That's the easiest thing. Unless you know that somebody was in screwing around with something where your wiring might have gone bad, because the wiring doesn't usually go bad just because. If someone was in pulling wires around, cutting stuff, whatever, then yes, it definitely could be bad. And if you just bought the boat and the gauge doesn't work and you have no idea what the history on that boat is, you definitely would want to check that wiring. But if you've been using the boat like I have and it all worked and now it suddenly doesn't, then usually it's an easy problem to troubleshoot. So I hope that helped you out. We'll see you again next time, but until then, have a great day.